I'm gonna turn off Civic.
All right, we are getting rocking and rolling. Everybody's now jumping in. Uh, get the chat set up. So as you're jumping in, one of the fun things about Zoom webinar is I actually have to set up the chat every single time. So real quick, just to make sure that I have it set up, drop where you're listening in from or calling, or, watching from. What city? City and state. Just so I know that things are actually working behind the scenes. All right. DC, Colorado, Austin. Okay, cool. And awesome. And when you guys do want to chat with the speakers, feel free to either do to the host and the panelists, or feel free to drop in and make sure it's selected for everybody. I know one of the things that, I mean, we've all watched the news. The reason why we put this together is because so many people have been impacted by what is happening with the changes in the federal government. So whether you're watching this live, which we're excited that you're here, or you're watching the replay, or the second time you've watched this because the information's so good, we want to give, we want to share, we want to equip, so that way the your next search, all this information saves you time. So, but before we get started with this amazing panel, our sponsoring host, our sponsoring company, Game One Technologies, we have Lee Ryan here to share. So, Lee, if you want to kick that off.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of the Fed Pivot Summit. I'm Lee Ryan, Senior Director of Operations at Gamma One Technologies, and I've had the privilege of managing programs and supporting mission-critical operations for NOAA and NASA for about 9 years now. I went back and I looked at how long I've been doing this, and it's about 9 years. And I just have to say, it's a pleasure to connect with you all today with so many individuals. You guys have all served the federal government with distinction and are now looking towards what's next. Transitioning out of federal service, I know, can be overwhelming. So whether it's expected or sudden, I want you to hear this clearly. Your expertise is still in very high demand. You've managed programs, you've led change, you've enforced compliance, and you've driven mission results. That translates directly to what companies like Gamma One and others in our industry look for every day. So today's sessions are designed to help you take that next step with confidence. You'll hear from people who don't just know the hiring process, they own it. They don't just talk the talk, they walk the walk. From recruiters to GovCon leaders, they'll give you the tools to refine your resume, tell your story, and land your next role. At Gamma One, our mission goes beyond the contract. We support federal service people behind the programs, right? And that's why we're sponsoring this event, because we believe in helping talented professionals like you find new ways to lead, contribute, and especially thrive. So day 2 today is all about action. Let's get started and let's get you ready for what's next. Thank you so much for being here. Hand it back over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Lee. I'm going to turn it over to Sierra. I'll let Sierra run the introductions for this amazing panel. So glad that you guys are here, whether it's live or watching the replays. We definitely care about you guys and what's happening. So see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Ben and Lee. We appreciate the introduction, and thank you for holding the space and inviting us out. So my name is Sierra Nasuti. I do marketing and sales with Agile Resources, part of the GEE group. And I co-host a monthly webinar with Ben called Last Friday Job Party. So we are out here every single month talking to job seekers like yourself about how to play the LinkedIn game. Because frankly, it's a game. It's a game and there's a strategy of how to win. And if I was in the position that I had to learn how to win the game, these are the people that I would want to speak to. So I'm really thrilled to be able to lead this conversation today and share some of this expertise. So I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves in no particular order. I'm just going across my screen. Ben, welcome.
Thank you, Sierra. Benjamin Sheffield here. As Sierra just mentioned, she and I are partners in more ways than one. We do run a monthly webinar for sessions very much like this. Called the Last Friday Job Party. I've been in the recruiting space now for a little bit over a decade. Holding a desk, I've put over 400 people to work in my career and worked at different points in my career with audits much like yourselves, folks coming out of the federal space, and I've even got a couple of contracting organizations that serve directly into that space as well currently. I am primarily an IT recruiter, but I've really touched in a lot of different industries, everything from accounting and finance to engineering to even some things like marketing and sales and that sort of thing. But just very much look forward to the conversation today. Very glad to be here, and I'm going to pass it along to Miss Sarah.
Hey guys, I am Sarah Johnston. I'm a former corporate recruiter. I worked recruiting in the retail space, in the healthcare and hospital space, as well as financial services before launching my own business, The Briefcase Coach. And I own a top global executive career branding firm. So if you want to talk resumes, I'm the person to talk to. I've written resumes for folks in all 50 states and 6 continents, and have a team now that's based across the country and just nerd out about job search stuff. So I'm so excited to be here.
All right, thank you so much. And Anthony, welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and those present and those watching in the future. It's like time traveling, right? My name is Anthony Roman. I am the Vice President of Talent right now for Mexico and Latin America for RGP. We're a global public project execution management consulting firm. But my entire professional life after college has been this. It's been putting people to work. It's literally the only thing I've ever done. And that now spans 27 years, and it spans geographies, economic cycles. I've been up and down through 3, maybe depending on how you define it, 4 recessions. I started off in New England. I've done stuff nationally, now internationally and globally. And the service lines or the work streams that I've serviced have really been all professional services. So really in depth in accounting and finance, information technology and management, project management, human capital, supply chain, even done some engineering and healthcare as well. So all that is to say, nothing that I think myself or any of the other panelists speak to is out of theory. It's all out of practical application. So we don't get our information from BuzzFeed quizzes. It is really just the stuff that works, because if it doesn't work, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense to us. So I certainly welcome any and all questions that you guys have. You'll get our honest and direct feedback and thoughts and educated decisions. But I also think it's important to note that everybody here on this panel is really just with a heart of service, so that we can hopefully assist you in this time, either current or future time of transition. So definitely appreciate your attendance. And Clint, I think that leaves you.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Anthony. I'm excited to be here. I'm Clint Hawkins. I have a leadership role of GEE Group. We are a national staffing agency with several brands throughout the country. I've been doing recruiting for roughly 20 years, and my favorite thing is to meet strangers and then introduce them to other strangers so they can find opportunities to find jobs. Spent this last year and a half really focusing on what some of the emotional setbacks and some of the things that hit pretty deep for folks when they go through job loss. So on top of all the street level skills that we'd like to teach you guys of how to go after and find new jobs, I'm trying to lean into like what's some of the emotional things that goes on, the mindset things that goes on with folks whenever they go through it. I've gone through it since 2020. I've gone through 3 different layoffs, and so I know what that heartbreak feels like, and that some of the anger, some of the different things that pops up. So feel free to also not just ask about tactics, but some of the tough things that you're going through. And feel free to message me on LinkedIn or add me on LinkedIn if you want to chat through those things too.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Clint. Thank you everybody for the introductions. I will let y'all know most of the people on this panel are like talking to strangers on airport people, just so you guys understand the vibe right away. But we are here today to be honest and move forward with you. We're going to set like Thanksgiving table rules here. We're not talking about why things happened. We're talking about how to move forward with what's going on. So with that, Anthony had this really great idea when we were brainstorming earlier, and we're going to kind of treat this the same way you would a physical injury, because getting laid off, it rips something out of you, especially when it was unexpected. So triage. What is my first step? I can't move forward. I have to stabilize. Who wants to take this one? First thing I do.
I'll jump in since everybody is just ridiculously shy, which is not going to change with the next question.
I was trying to get up and mute.
I know, right? Yeah. So, and it's funny because Ben and I have talked about this a bunch. But the first thing you have to do is breathe. And that's it. And you think about it when, you're doing something physical and you were a child and fell down, and what did you have to do? You have to catch your breath. And that's literally no different than what the current state is. So again, transition is difficult whether or not it's planned. And the first thing you have to do is emotionally prepare, physically react to it, which is breathing. The second, you have to breathe through it, right? Otherwise, you pass out and then bad things happen. But then you are not prepared to react until you have good grounding. So I would literally say, and it's not to be corny, breathe through it and then get your bearings and get your surroundings. If you have not, and it's funny, as I was thinking about this summit and thinking about the population that we're talking to, federal employees, contractors, people, FedCon stuff, right? GovCon stuff. When you think about it, it's no different than anybody going through transition in a different part of their life. And it could be transitioning from the military into civilian. It could be a long-term employee into the job market when they haven't done it in 20 years. It could be somebody transitioning industries. If you've planned it, you feel a little bit better about driving it, but you have to wrap your head around the fact that things are going to change. Change is typically scary for folks. And if it's not, you're blessed. That's fantastic. But the very first thing I would do is breathe. And then the second thing I would do is to get your stores in order and really take an inventory of your consumable skills. And it's a mindset shift if you're looking at going into and transitioning into the private sector. It's what are my consumables? What are the wares that I have to sell in the open market? And then it's a whole cascade of things that happen when you begin to talk about how do I reframe? How do I define? How do I categorize? Where do I leverage my strengths? What are my strengths, right? These are things that you might not have had to talk about, but it's an entire series of steps in the process, which we'll get into. But I would really start with just breathing and catching your breath.
I'll back up on that one. I very much agree with Anthony that is the first step. Once you've got your breath gathered, and I will say this just to be fairly intentional about stating it, make sure that you know to tap into your support system, for lack of a better phrase. You've got if you're a person at home with a wife and kids, at the end of the day, managing that early stress at home, having the conversations that need to be had with the wife or the spouse. I shouldn't just say wife. Some of you have husbands. And making sure that you're setting level set expectations there. Dealing with that stress at home is going to be very important for you in the early phases of this. And then beyond that, if you tap into folks nearest to you professionally, tap into mentors and individuals that may be a good networking source for you as you look to land your next job, making sure you're getting that information out there fairly quickly after you've had time to breathe and digest. I'll tell a personal story. Anthony Roman is a two-time former boss of mine. And Anthony has been very good for me in my own network in the past when I've had difficulties at work, including a layoff on my own end. So I'll just say that, at the end of the day, having people in your corner that know you, not just as a professional, but as a person, and they can kind of give outside guidance, counsel, scope of resource, et cetera. Having that in your corner and getting to that individual fairly early in the process of gaining the foothold is important. I've got a couple of other thoughts, but I don't want to overspeak. I'll yield the floor real quickly and see if other folks want to tap in. If not, I'll keep going. So.
I'll just say, I think you have to control the internal narrative as well. I'm talking to a room full of winners, people who've always been successful, who've always worked hard, who, have done all the right things. And when the carpet gets ripped out from underneath you really quickly and sometimes unexpectedly, it is really easy to feel like a failure. And I just want to encourage everybody in the room to capture those thoughts, and you've got to control that internal narrative and remind yourself that this is of no fault to you. This is something that is completely, separate from something that you've done from a performance level, and focus on the good, focus on good thinking. I've talked to multiple executives over the past few days who've told me that they've woken up in the middle of the night in night sweats, just feeling so anxious about their future and about just job searching because they haven't had to put themselves out there in years. And you've got to stop those thoughts when they happen. Talk to yourself in your head and just say, hey, Sarah, stop thinking that way. This is not true. And try to reframe it into something positive. And like Ben and Anthony have already said, you've got to surround yourself with those people, those super fans that care about you, that support you. Job searching is a team sport, and you shouldn't do it by yourself.
I love that, Sarah. The thing that Sarah just spoke to about being kindest to yourself and within the phrase of your own head, I think that's incredibly valuable. 'Cause at the end of the day, we win and lose battles in our mind, and I think that again, framing it as taking all the measures that one needs to take to frame it in a very positive light is very critical and important. Um,
I want to chime into
again,
something Taryn put in the chat as not professional advice. This is secondhand recycled. One of my best friends is a therapist, and she says, you know, the voices in your head, they're on the bus with you, but they can't drive. So if they're getting really loud, you just turn the music up, you put on your favorite song, and you tell them that they have to shut up. It's a, you know, and it's a lot easier said than done, but you can't get rid of them, but you can drown them out. So moving forward, did anybody want to anything else on this topic before we kind of move forward a little bit?
I have another thought, and I'm going to shut up and for a little
Okay.
bit on my side. I tend to talk, so I apologize up front for that. Um, Learning very early on how to set manageable expectations early in the process of seeking new work is very important. I'm a big believer in setting an organized structure. Now that's going to evolve over time as you're in the process getting deeper into the job search and so on and so forth. You're going to learn what works for you and what doesn't. But really maintaining that mindset that to get a job is really a full-time job, that the process of getting one. You really have to be very intentional about structuring your time, structuring your energy, and structuring your focus in ways. I'll tell you that what has helped me in the past is when I have been in your shoes, is really just setting a daily routine and getting after it, just as if I were working a full day that day. And I even followed my routine of, you know, getting up, dressing for work, right? And making sure that I'm having that early foundation set, you know, early on of intentionality. You know, obviously, you know, it's something that you got to do, and you have to kind of push past that instability to really, you know, organize your time well early on in the process. But I will be quiet for now.
So if anybody wants to chime in and go on this, when we are in, you know, that initial triage stage and we've took a minute to breathe, we had a bad night, we wake up the next morning, we get dressed. Am I on LinkedIn? Am I on Indeed? What would your first action items be? What kind of goals should I be setting?
I'll take a shot at this one because uh, what I've seen is, especially like I can give some examples of what I see here happening in Austin, Texas, and I have a parallel with what some folks are going through on that are on this event right now. Is like so Dell Computers is based here, and there's folks that have worked for Dell for 15, 20 years. Even some of them are actually like Dell working for like their federal services, these types of things, and they've gone through a lot of rifts over the past 2 years. So we have a lot of folks that been like legacy, been here a really long time. And so then they go through this abrupt change that they couldn't control, and all of a sudden they're out of work, and they're also like Anthony was saying, kind of like it's hard to like take an inventory a little bit of like the skills, like these this thing and the thing I'm staring at right now are great for some things, but they are not great for your mental state whenever you're going through all this. Because all of a sudden you're just like you're looking at news. We don't need any more news about this. Like I'm in like this, I'm in the news, right? You're maybe start to look at LinkedIn postings and all this stuff, but it's actually it can kind of drift you away from some of the core things you need to start to take care of yourself. I would suggest just get an old school legal pad, get a notepad, and go get someplace quiet and start to write down some of your greatest hits and some of the things that you enjoy doing at work and where you felt like you're adding value. And start with like a physical and just slow it down, like type of thing, and write it down for yourself. Because once we start to get on these screens, whether it's your phone, your laptop, whatever, we get distracted, and it's not like a healthy distraction. It pulls us right back into the yuck. And So I would suggest when you're first triaging this and you're kind of taking inventory, taking stock of the things you kick butt at, the things you do well, get old school with it. Go get some quiet space and get a notepad. That'd be my first piece. And then on top of that, emotionally, I have one page that's like, here's all the stuff that I want to talk about, to brag about myself. And it's gonna sound kind of silly. For the first time in your life, I'm gonna tell you something like objectify yourself. Like take yourself, like pretend you're somebody else. Pretend you're talking to your best friend or your cousin or whoever. Like, hey, you're awesome. Like, check out the things you do. And if you can kind of like separate yourself for a moment when you make this list and you write them out, that's healthy. Like you need to be in that pocket. The other page, like another place in the notebook, is like write out some of these things that are breaking your heart, write out some of these things that are upsetting you and you're angry with, and make a list and just hand it off. Like you make that list and you write it all down and you take it and be like, okay, well, there's all that head trash. I don't need it today. And it's like, toss it, get it out of your brain. But putting it on paper and like tossing it physically will help you like reset.
I want to double click into something that Clint touched on, and it's first of all, I would start with something simple. If you're talking about Sierra, if you're talking about straight tactics, like what do I do, right? Not the hypotheticals. Start by making your bed. Honest to God, like it's something as simple as that. And everybody, if you haven't seen it, go Google the I think it was the Admiral's speech at the Naval Academy's graduation, and he's like, make your bed. If everything else in your day goes to the crapper and throughout, at the end of the day, you come back to a freshly made bed and you feel good about that. It's structure, it's routine, it's something, it kind of resets mentally. The other thing too is when we think about tactics, and Clint was talking about the tools that we currently have, right? And what are those? It's screens. And it is super simple to when your loved one, family, friends, anybody who's invested in your career success is asking you, well, what have you done? Well, I've been on LinkedIn. Well, what does being on LinkedIn mean, right? It means you're sitting there staring. And there's a term called doom scrolling, and it is for a reason. It's the rabbit hole that everybody tends to go down 9 hours a day, whether or not you want to, right? But here's the thing, it's a bit of a necessary evil, right? Because back in the day, prior to the internet, you didn't have that. So what did you do? You connected with people. These are tools and analogies, connections to get to people. What I would absolutely recommend you do both now and every day in the future of your life is be in acquisition mode, knowledge acquisition mode. Have you ever, and I'm going to evidence this through analogy, have you ever talked to somebody who was really passionate about anything they did? It could be cars, it could be sports, it could be cooking, it could be whatever. But when you talk to them about the subject that they are entrenched in, eyes light up, energy, they brighten the room, right? Their posture is forward. That person is attractive to engage with. And why do I bring that to this point in the conversation? Because you need to be in information acquisition mode. And you need to position yourself to barter and trade information. What is your commodity when you're in the job market? It's trading information. In the horrible recessions that I've been through, no matter what geography, skill set, work stream, whatever, as a recruiter, what do you talk to? You talk to people in very tough situations. And as an armchair therapist, as we all are, armchair psychologists, it can absolutely weigh. So what I saw was as a trend, right? Just information trend. What I saw was as we began to trade information, because as my candidates or the people that I'm talking to are having bad days, they're having one. I'm magnified by the 50 people I talked to that day, right? And so what we began to see, or what I began to see, is the more I traded information, I grew, the people I talked to grew. And I remember specific candidates that through the last recession, I know I was on their calendar because it was the same day of the week and roughly the same time that I would get the phone calls, and we would trade. What have you heard? What have you seen? What do you know? And every bit and piece of that tactical information I now have, and I can trade in the next conversation. So what you need to guard against, and I know we've talked a lot about mindset and approach in the very beginning of this, because it's so important, right? It's not attractive and not magnetizing to talk to someone who is overtly down in the dumps. We're all there, and I get it. I'm not saying that you can insulate yourself against it, but if you reframe your point of success as being the acquisition of leverageable information, now that's your win, right? What did you learn today? When my 4-year-old comes home from pre-K, no matter what smiley face or not that he gets on his behavior agenda, I always ask him, what'd you learn today? What did you learn today? Why? Because now I'm hopefully reframing and focusing his brain on learning. That's the exciting point. And what you find is that as you aggregate these conversations in a tactical manner, you become a point of information. You have some gravitational pull where now people are reaching out to you. Why? Because you're a nexus of information. It could be trends in the marketplace, things that you're hearing and seeing, systems, people moving in the markets, whatever it is. If you reframe and focus on that, it turns that doom scrolling into information acquisition, and it's a much more positive experience. I hope that makes sense.
So we've talked a lot already about systems that you can have for yourself. I think it's also important to have a system that works for your family and your household. For those of you who are in relationships or who have partners or spouses, I'm speaking as someone who is a trailing spouse. My husband has a job that has required us to move every few years. And about 5 years ago, he was in a position that had an end date. And that end date required us to move. And I knew it was going to be a cross country move. And I was feeling very anxious as what I would call the passenger in the job search. I had no control over my husband's actions. He was the job seeker, but I was going to experience all of the transitions that would come with him making a career move. And what I found that was really helpful, and this is controversial, I've shared this before with other people, and people have said, take it or, they didn't love this advice, but my advice is to set aside some weekly time for kind of office hours with your spouse, with your partner, to talk about your job search and to show the effort that you're making as a job seeker. As the passenger, I wanted to talk about the job search all the time. It brought me anxiety. I wanted to know what my husband was doing every day. I wanted to talk about houses that we might look at. I wanted to talk about churches and schools that my kids were going to. And my husband had very little mental bandwidth to talk about those things because he was working a stressful job. He felt anxiety about his job search in general. So setting aside specific office hours for us to talk about the job search was really beneficial to him and to me. And I love that he showed me the effort that he was making, the people that he was having conversations with. It helped me to wrap my head around his efforts when I saw like proof of what he was doing, not from an accountability standpoint, but just informational.
Support. I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Now we did get a question in the chat. Which the chat is open. You guys, please, we will chime in with the Q&A as they pop out. But Clint, Jillian had a question that I think you would be great to answer. Do you have any advice for individuals who struggle with ADHD or ADD in regards to focus and structure?
Absolutely. I was late diagnosis ADHD, like in my late 30s. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, that makes sense why some of these things I really struggle with. And yeah, because you can have some really, really rough days. And it's not exactly your fault. Your brain might be going haywire on you. So some of the things that are like a hacks for me, at least when I'm having like hard days of focus, especially dealing with screens and dealing with smaller tactical things, is actually taking something physical and having it on my desk. And like there's two things that I'll do. I'll take a deck of cards and actually have like a deck of cards of 50, 52 cards, whatever, like playing cards, and make a game of something like, all right, I need to go apply for a certain amount of jobs. And I'll count out cards and have a stack and then make a game of it where I'm flipping them over. So it gives me this like something physical here that I got my hands on that makes it kind of gamify. I know it sounds kind of silly, but it helps me not get down rabbit holes of things that are on the screens that are again kind of like putting you either doom scroll or whatever it might be. Another way to do it is like have a mason jar or like a coffee cup full of paper clips and do the same thing. Like make a goal of like my goal is to transfer all the paper clips from here to here. And I'll know when I get that done, I knocked out a big chunk of work, like a sprint of either applying or a sprint of making connections or sending out emails, whatever it is. So it's like building something like that into my physical or on my desk to help me tackle it helps. Also, sometimes doing a physical activity with this is going to sound kind of funny too, but like if I'm having a rough day, I'll just take my laptop out into the garage and grab a jump rope, or I'll grab a couple hand weights or something where it's like, again, I almost need to be activating more physically and mentally at the same time. And that helps me kind of get through this. And I don't know if that's relevant to you guys, but that's the thing that helps me through my ADD type of like sessions if I'm like physically active on the top of the task.
No, and I don't want to dive too much into this rabbit hole because I know this is a favorite rabbit hole because there's a lot of neurodiversity, myself included, on this call. But I wanted to chime in and say there are two other like avenues that you can go with this. You can go to like straight up body doubling. So take yourself to a coffee shop, a library, something where other people are working. And you're like, well, now I can't be on TikTok because like all these people are going to see me and nobody's paying attention to you. But it's a mental game. And the other idea is right along with what Clit said is, dress comfortably. You want to be physically present in your body and make yourself comfortable to be able to do something that's mentally uncomfortable. So a lot of times I work on a yoga ball. You can wear your yoga pants. Nobody's going to know, especially if it's on Zoom. You're only seeing here up. So that could help as well. Does that answer your question? I think so. I saw some positive comments.
I want to make an extra point, and this is just real brief, and it's very much off script to what Sarah just said a moment ago, as far as getting out and getting among the hum of people when it comes to work. Look, if you're actively looking for work, the one thing I would recommend is just not sitting. If you don't thrive well being alone, don't be at home alone. Go to a Starbucks, go to a coffee shop nearby, go somewhere where you're around the hum of people, around the energy of others. It has an effect on you. Anthony, I think everybody here knows this about me. I was going to say Anthony, but I know Sierra and Clint, and I believe Sarah does as well. I don't work at home. My office is in Jacksonville, Florida. I live north of Atlanta. I'm in a Starbucks. I'm in a local coffee shop. I'm sitting in a studio right now that I pay for monthly on my own. I have to be around people. So if you thrive off the energy of others, do seize on that. That's it. I wanted to say that as well.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, you'll never find Ben in the office. He's always working from a Starbucks. But let's kind of circle back to our original point here. When we're setting up, whether it be our bowl of paper clips or whatnot, and we're setting these goals for ourselves, how do I want to define what goals I'm setting? Do I want to apply to a certain number of jobs? Do I want to make a certain number of connections? What are some good guideposts that I could start with?
I think this one is a little bit fuzzy. And it's a great question to ask, and it's a completely fair question to ask. And especially if you haven't been in the space for a while, you begin to quantify and think that that's the answer. The issue is if you applied to, how many jobs can you apply to? Well, right now, because of automated tools and ATSs and easy apply on LinkedIn and all that, what, 500 a day? It's not so much the number and how many jobs do you want at the same time, right? So I think again, reframing the success in the pursuit of finding something that truly aligns with you and then making connections to lead you to that path. I think that you're probably better served as your pursuit. But again, if I applied to 100 jobs and let's say half of them respond back to me, how in the world am I going to handle 50 interviews in the next couple of days, right? So think about what winning looks like and work backwards from that. I think everybody would probably feel, and this is the fuzzy part, it's the feel. I think you would feel a lot better about having a fewer number of opportunities that you're engaged with that you really connect and align with and are excited about versus, oh yeah, I have an interview. Think about how that feels. Oh yeah, I got an interview tomorrow. What's it about? I don't know. It's just an interview. I'm taking it for practice. Versus, I can't wait to talk to Sarah and Sierra tomorrow. From what I read, like I'm super hyped on how I can align. I just think that it's a little bit of that, and that takes some some trial and error. But I would caution you against flooding thousands of applications, because what happens if they all say yes?
Or I'll say no. I'll go with
Well, I'll
that.
say no.
I think that's what's happening to people right now, is that the easy apply has made it so easy for people to apply for jobs. And that is the measure that people are evaluating their job search efforts. They're saying, I applied for 100 jobs this week because the easy button made it so easy. But they're one of 100 or 200 or 500 applicants for that single position. So your job as a job seeker is not necessarily to push the easy apply button, but instead it's to connect with decision makers. And that decision maker could be a recruiter, it could be a Ben, a Clint, an Anthony, or it could be someone who has the ability to make a hire. And that could be a hiring manager. It could be someone in your network that knows great people. Because I tell people this day in and day out, it only takes one person to change the trajectory of your job search. And if you're stuck behind a screen and just pushing the easy button, you're not having conversations and people aren't having the ability to decide yes or no on you.
I've got, if it's okay, I saw something in the chat from Hendrik, and I think it goes along with this. Like, okay, so what, Hendrik, if I'm paraphrasing this, like, what do you do when you're not getting responses and it feels like it's going into a void? So I would suggest trying to drive conversations, like what Sarah's saying, like try to drive conversations, but keep your conversations, the barrier of entry to your conversations light. So what I mean is, don't chuck a resume at every stranger you see. I would start off with lightweight. Hey, do you have 15 minutes to give me some advice? I'm looking into your guys' company. I'd like to know more about it. Hey, I see you're on this team. So there's a couple of ways of looking at this too. When you're researching a company, let's say you apply to a company, you're really jazzed up about it. Like Anthony said, like you picked a good one. You're like, oh, this looks good. Not getting a response. Okay, maybe they're getting hundreds of applications. That's fine. And the relevancy thing, maybe it's not ranking you up. However, if you want to become relevant, doing a little, guerrilla marketing work and looking things up, looking up the nomenclature of an email address for that company, looking for who might be your likely suspect of who would be the hiring manager, and that's one way to go. But even looking for people that are probably team members there and doing these lightweight questions to them, either send them a LinkedIn message or send them an email and just say, I'm really interested in hearing about your guys' company. Can you give me some advice? Can we spend 15 minutes and chat? If you go full tilt every time with a follow-up and like, and here's my PDF resume, here's the link to my LinkedIn. It's actually one, it might get caught in spam. Two, it's a little heavy. It's like a heavy thing to throw out to a stranger for all the things. So driving more base hits versus home runs when you're trying to tackle that, it'll create more frequency and get more of a flywheel effect. And mentally, you'll start to feel some wins versus just sitting, spraying and praying, like you're just shotgunning out everywhere and just waiting for the magical portal LinkedIn that tells you you got something.
And Clint just hit on something that it's an old maxim, but it holds true no matter what the world is. Is if you ask for a job, you're going to get advice, and if you ask for advice, you're going to get a job. Like that whole creating demand through networking, and it's an interrogatory, and it's learning. It does many things. Number one, it gives you a much more rounded insight than a screen will give you. And you can go on Glassdoor and research. And I mean, it's like a restaurant review. How many people post positive reviews versus negatives, right? And everybody's experience is going to be specific to them. But I think if you find something that you're interested in and you really want to learn about culture and you want to learn about fit, because those are the things that are important to you, you build a cadre of support and insight by doing exactly what Clint said. And by the way, when LinkedIn first came out, that's what we used it for, was really just building up those profiles. And then let's say you do apply through the website, easy apply, whatever. And most of the time when you apply through LinkedIn, it's routed through their website anyway. But what ends up happening is somebody can be your advocate and say, hey, by the way, I saw that Sarah Johnston applied, or I heard from her. She seems like a really good candidate. Can you check and see if her application is in there? And now you've got, a positive highlight on it versus drooped in. But think about that and dovetail that into your approach. And guys, I think everything that we're talking about layers, right? And it's tactics stacked upon tactics, wrapped in that whole mindset package. And hopefully this is beginning to give you some actionable items.
Speaking kind of broadly to what's been discussed, now I love this particular topic for the record. Look, we're all in and around the job space. We're all probably networkers by trade. I know that individuals that are being impacted by these events probably haven't learned how to do that yet. Now is a good time to really start not just thinking about building your network for now, but honestly laying foundation for a strong network going forward as well. There's an old saying, if you never want to be thirsty, learn to dig a proper well. This is your period right now to where you can do that from a networking perspective, so that obviously the pain points that exist now are there, they're real, and you and someone moving forward on this. But certainly also just always remember to nurture your network going forward. Whatever network that you're building through these tactics, whatever whatever things that are being accomplished right now, as Anthony said a moment ago, it begins to stack over time, for what that's worth. So.
And I wanted to tag onto that LinkedIn has some really great prompts for messages, and especially if you easy apply for a role, if the recruiter has tagged themselves, it gives you a really great prompt. But it's a prompt, and if you send that message to a recruiter, there's a good chance that they've gotten about 300 of the exact same AI message. So if you are going to take the time to reach out to somebody, please make sure that, like, you're going to delete spam emails if I sprayed an email out to you that you weren't interested in. So same rule goes here. I reply to job seekers all the time who send me honest messages, and I'm like, I am actually not involved in hiring for this role at all, but I can connect you with who is. So a little human connection in the AI dominated world goes a really long way.
One thing recruiters never do is send spam emails, right, guys?
And I'm not sure, Sierra, if we're prompted to go to this part next, but Anthony was kind of hinting at it already, and Ben was talking about the beginning too, and I'm sure Sarah has some major philosophy on this also, because the way the type of work she does is like, if you track all the things that you're doing, and what I'm going to talk about is like the idea of like a job tracker, and this is like something that's a spreadsheet for yourself. I'm sure Sarah, Sierra, Ben, we all have like some probably templates we can pop into into the chat of how to do this. And it's like a Google sheet or an Excel sheet. And think of this as like, what if you were a detective, okay? And you're like taking down the mob, and you're like, okay, I need to I know there's somebody behind the scenes. There's a mob boss here somewhere that's that's running the show for these things. So when you apply for a job or you see a company, you're like, ooh, that's the mission I want to be on. Like that looks good. Put that in your tracker. Then put in what is the job you applied for. Put in the hyperlink of where did you apply for it? Like what was your password and login? Because like all these different portals that you have. Then have a section for like notes and then have a section for like who is your likely suspect that you think is running the show. And if you track it, and like Anthony was saying, like they kind of layer on layer on layer, but our brains can only handle so much of the layering, and we just forget. And you might be this close to pushing everything off the ledge, and I got it. Like I figured out all the things, and I figure out who it is, or I got the final warm introduction. But if you don't have a spreadsheet that's kind of tracking your progress, help map that out, it can be tough to realize you might be closer than you think to getting that last thing. So that's my hot take. Like besides just applying, like what's some of the homework that you do past that and keep it organized?
Yeah, no, I think we're definitely kind of into the meat of things now, into this like diagnostics and how I move forward in the job search. So as we're talking about LinkedIn, let's kind of pivot a little bit. We're on LinkedIn, we're ready to apply. I need to go to the briefcase coach to learn how to write my resume. I haven't done it maybe in 20 years because I've been in the federal space. Sarah, if just, start us off high level, like what are your top must-haves or must-don'ts on a resume? Where do we start?
The first thing you should do kind of goes back to marketing 101. You have to know who your target audience is and what your target audience cares about. So a lot of times I talk to job seekers and they say, Sarah, I'm making a transition and I think that I could either be a chief of staff or I could be a customer success manager, but I don't know which one I want to do. And I'll tell you, the transferable skills for, yes, a chief of staff and customer success manager are there. Like you could probably do both jobs, but the way that you would market yourself for these jobs is different. So I would say, first thing you need to do is figure out the type of job that you're trying to position yourself for so that your resume speaks so clearly to that audience and the person that's receiving it clearly sees that, yes, you can do that job and you have the skills. So the second thing that I would suggest you do is you think about the job that you want. And let's say you select that chief of staff pathway. You're going to find a couple of job descriptions that align with the type of work that you want to do. And listen, I don't use ChatGPT to write resumes for my business, but I think for you as a job seeker, ChatGPT could be a fantastic resource for helping you think through the right narrative to show. So you get the job descriptions and you run them in ChatGPT with some prompts like evaluate these job descriptions and pull out the key skills that they're looking for in this role. And so you'll get a list of keywords from the job description. You want to make sure that you use those keywords and skills in your resume so that you are giving the reader the keywords that they're looking for as they're evaluating you as a candidate. You also could ask ChatGPT to come up with a list of 20 behavioral interview questions for you based on what the job descriptions are looking for. You can use those behavioral interview questions to ask yourself kind of your results and impact. Your goal when writing your resume is to make sure that you're addressing every single line of the job description and showcasing that you have the experience that they're looking for. And for you federal employees, it's important to translate the work that you've done for the federal government in the language of the corporate business, which is where I really think looking at job descriptions and thinking about your experience from that lens could be really helpful.
No, that's awesome. I appreciate you clicking us off there. And yeah, the first day at any new corporate job, it's like they're speaking a different language because every company is going to have their own little symbols and platforms. So no, that was absolutely it. But you mentioned before there's a method you like. You call it RAS. Could you walk us through that?
Absolutely. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that job seekers make, and I'm seeing this a lot, I keep talking to federal employees, and the federal resume is so different than a corporate result rich resume in that a federal resume, you often have a list of just things that you've done, tasks that you've accomplished, and it reads a lot like a job description. Well, a great resume for the corporate world reads like a result rich, impactful document. And what I mean by that is I want to see numbers or proof that you've got the experience that you say that you have. And there's one kind of philosophy in the writing world that says, don't bury the lead or don't make it hard for someone who's reading your story to understand your impact, which is why when we write resume bullet points, we really like to use the RAS formula, which stands for result, action, situation. So thinking through those behavioral interview questions that I mentioned that you should consider, asking yourself about your experience, write out your stories, write out your answers, and then flip the story so that the result, it starts at the end with your resume bullet point. So it could say something like catapulted sales 20% year over year through targeted marketing efforts, something like that. I'm just riffing here, but you're leading with that result in your resume bullet point, and someone is seeing the proof of your experience.
And Sarah's the expert on this in the panel. Because honestly, I don't like resumes, and this is the only thing I've ever done right. But because it's the people, like I buy into the people. But here's the thing, and I'll even give you, I completely co-sign everything she said, but I'm going to give you an antecedent, a precursor exercise, and I'm very much a fan of Socrates in this space. It's know thyself, right? And it's funny because you are the foremost expert on you in the world. There's literally no one else on this planet that can tell you more about you than you, right? And you have to remember that when you are in a job search mode, you are going, and this is where it's a little bit at contrast to what human nature is to not brag on self. And we're not saying to brag, but if you are not your own advocate, no one else will be. And you have to understand that, but you also have to deliver that information in a consumable fashion. And so what Sarah was talking about in terms of optimizing your resume with words and phrasing that is going to resonate with the receiver of that information. And we're talking about making sure that you are reframing scope and responsibility, because the numbers could be ridiculously huge in a federal or a military sense. And you've got to be able to commoditize that down to be consumed. But I'm going to give you a predicate exercise that I found that folks have found helpful. And it's that whole Socrates, know thyself. So what I would recommend at the very beginning, right? You're going to breathe, you're going to make your bed, you're going to do all those initial moves. I would 100% go to a quiet place or a Starbucks, whatever works, where you don't have the distractions that are screen and doom scrolling. And I would go old school, like Clint said, and I would get out a legal pad or a notebook, and I would brain dump. And what I tell people is go up 50,000 feet and look at your life. And I didn't say look at your professional career, look at your life. And you're going to look thematically at who you are. And so what does that look like? Well, if you begin to start looking at things and say, well, I ran my own landscaping crew when I was in high school. I was a captain of this team. I led my Boy Scout or Girl Scout troop. I was a club president. I did this. And all of a sudden now thematically, you begin to see leadership. You'll probably also see that evidence in your roles, in your professional life. And that doesn't mean you have to be chief of anything. Maybe you were a lead on a project here, or maybe you were an employee resource group leader here, or maybe you initiated. But you get my point, right? You begin to see who you are, not what you did, which dovetails into what Sarah was talking about in terms of task-focused resumes. Because I think in the world we're in today, and I'm not going to make a differentiation between public and private sector, but in the world we're in today, I think people are very much focused on the result and not exactly how you got there. And that's what innovation is, right? Because if you look at the technology world, everyone is, or supply chain or whatever, always looking to get it done better, faster, smarter. And how can you remove steps, remove friction? So that the way that you got to the result is always going to change. And that's the pursuit. That's the fun part. But I would look thematically at who you are. People typically, in my experience, come with between 4 and 7 categories of person. And then once you are good with that theme across the top, I would begin to brain dump under each pillar all of the experience and all of the iterations and examples of where you've done the things and drop it down. And this could be pages of information. And it's, if you think that you are a team player or whatever your category is, but ultimately you don't see a lot of examples when you're being intellectually honest with yourself, maybe that doesn't become a theme, right? And you can iterate it out. But what I would do is once you have this document, and for some people it takes days, for other people it takes months, because it's a very introspective exercise. Now I think you have the basis for then going into what Sarah was talking about and looking at how you see yourself in what you've done and what you've produced. By the way, the other thing I would do is once you have this kind of master document, I would keep it forever, and then you add to it over time. But I would also bounce it off the people that know you the most and know you the best and gain their in, because that objective perspective is super important in this process, because it's not how you see yourself that's myopic, it's how others see you that's consumable, right? And you really need to make those versions of yourself align as much as possible. I hope that makes sense.
That was really great information. And no, the other day, Clint and I were talking when we were putting our bios together for this, which was like, a mini resume. We're like, oh man, I don't know what I want to put in my, I sound so pretentious. And a resume is like 4 pages of the same thing. So absolutely agree with that one there. There was a question from the chat. So we have the chat open and then the Q&A as well that I wanted to pause out to the group. It's actually an anonymous question in regards to formatting these things on your resume. I think it's in response to Sarah's point. If you can't share actual numbers, whether they're not presented or they're confidential, how would you present that information? The person asked if they should guesstimate if the numbers aren't finalized, but how would we go about presenting that, whatever that situation is? Sorry, that's a roundabout question.
Sometimes use like for example, if I'm talking to someone and this information hasn't been publicly shared or released, but we want to show impact, I might do XXM to represent multi-million. And so think about how many placeholders that might be. So that's one way to showcase it. Or if you don't want to even include that, you could put saved millions or saved a percentage. Sometimes a percentage is information that you can share because no one knows necessarily what the past and future state was?
Yeah, or doubled, halved, something like that that doesn't actually say anything. No, awesome. Thank you for that, Sarah. Does that answer the question for the person in the chat who put that one up? Okay, perfect. All right. On to the next point we had here, which I have lost because I moved the thing around. So now that we've kind of gone through how we want to do our resume and we're formatting it, how are we going to translate that resume onto our LinkedIn profile so that it's there with our easy apply? Ben, do you want to take this one?
You can start with it. Yeah, I think from my perspective, there's two trains of thought on LinkedIn. One is very much trying to relay your resume information directly over to LinkedIn. I don't personally subscribe to that personally. LinkedIn is more of for lack of a better phrase, more of a social networking tool within the job space, right? So I'm really aiming more toward obviously having some functional data in there, but really focusing more on the highlights and things that I've accomplished. I think more so on LinkedIn than otherwise. It is a keyword rich model, which if you're not familiar with it, what that means, it goes back to something Sarah said earlier about resume creation. You know, when employers are out there looking for candidates, they're looking for certain keywords along with job title and so on and so forth. The same rules apply on LinkedIn. But yeah, LinkedIn is a different snapshot for me than a resume is. I will yield the floor on that one to others though, because I don't want to overspeak on that. I have some other thoughts as well on LinkedIn coming soon, but I want to give other people time to talk to this topic.
Um, and it's funny, Ben, because I would look at you as the LinkedIn guy. So here I've always thought about LinkedIn as the gateway drug to a person, right? So I think it's something that we need to. And by the way, doctor, take your own medicine. Like I don't do a good job of this myself, but I think it's something that we need to consistently look at as we evolve and progress. Our profile should probably evolve and progress. So
Sure.
whereas you cannot put, there's no way that you could put all of your experience and how much of it becomes relevant. And I know in the chat somebody had said, well, if you went to an Ivy League school 25 years ago, that whole rate of relevance decreases with time, right? And it doesn't mean that it's not relevant, but it's how much of it is impactful in current stage and day and age. But I think that if we are consistently looking at broadcasting and sharing the most salient and impactful pieces of what we do in those bullet points, and then couple that with outreach and messaging and connecting with people, if someone's interested, they'll ask more, right? Because if you evidence a higher function, the lower task to get there is assumed. But I think that's something that we can probably always look to optimize our profile at picking out the biggest parts of what you've done in your prior roles. And again, it shouldn't be 72 pages because then you're making somebody doom scroll, but it's just give them a taste, evidence what you find and feel is most important and impactful, and then that begins engagement.
Kind of tagging off this, there was another question in the Q&A. Somebody used the phrase that they were overeducated and underexperienced, and I hate that personally so much. Does anybody else want to address that one? If you're, I know Sarah, you had put something about putting education at the bottom in the chat as well.
I'll hit on this one.
Okay,
I think
thank you.
that perhaps this person is thinking underexperienced in terms of where they're headed in the future. And so, gosh, this is a tricky one because it's so specific to someone's unique situation. And I really want to be sitting across the table from them to understand where they are and their perception of being underexperienced. But I'm imagining that this is a positioning issue more than anything, and maybe the way that you view yourself. And so again, without knowing this person's specific experience, it's hard to speak to it, but I bet you're undervaluing the experience that you do have. And maybe it would help for you to have someone else look at you and help you reframe what you've done from a lens of what you want to do moving forward outside the federal government.
Yeah, I think that was the best
Yeah.
weird thing people do with that information, but I appreciate it. Sorry, Anthony.
No, no worries. I've seen this over time, and I remember the first time I saw this was at the God, I sound like I'm dating myself, but like the dot-com bubble burst, right? And what people would do in a recession is take and find safe haven in education, right? So they would take a time out from the workforce, go to school, become out education heavy, and have expectations. So this, I think, is I think this plays out across time and space. But if you feel that you are, to Sarah's point, it's positioning, right? If you feel that you are education heavy and experience light, and there's not exactly an equilibrium there, number one, I would offer that you should probably reframe that. But what is education? And education is an investment in your ability to adapt and move forward. Recognize this, right? Education is dated by the time you receive it, and it is solely intended to help you adjust and adapt to stimulus coming forward in the future, right? What I learned in school X amount of years ago, I mean, that curriculum was written before I saw it, right? So here's what I would tell you is that if you feel that way, I would ask you to reframe that, and I would ground on this. I would ground on the fact that you had such an intellectual curiosity that you wanted to further your interest in study of a particular topic, whatever that is, so that keywords, so that you are even better equipped when you are facing relevant situations in the future. If a person, if a hiring manager or anybody asks you about that, like, hey, listen, you seem a little heavy here, your expectations need to just be, I want to provide value, right? So if that means that you are better equipped to provide value than someone with lesser education, then the employer wins, right? But it's an intellectual pursuit that you invested in yourself, and now you are eager to apply that education and the pattern recognition that it may have developed in you that might be outpacing your tactical experience. And again, everybody else wins. So much of it is framing, right?
I'll tell a quick story here, just to make it personal in regard to a little bit of what they both stated there, and I'll also give a quick fact that I don't think most people recognize. In today's time, the average individual changes careers more than not roles or companies, but careers more than 3 times in their lifetime. In today's time, that's an industry statistic that's out there and that's known. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll see I've got a master's in education. I'm not a teacher. I use some of my skill set in teaching to do what I do for a living in recruitment. Speaking to some of Anthony's point a moment ago, and I have shifted from that into customer support. Now, early on in my career, I did a little bit of sales. Was not very good at sales, to tell on myself on that side, and that led me directly to Anthony Roman's desk in 2014, which led me to having a pretty good career start at how old was I then? Gosh, I'm dating myself here. I was not in my early 20s, we'll put it that way. Here's the reality, guys, and this is somewhat speaking intentionally to everyone in the room that's seeing this. You are potentially going into a career shift right now and really tapping into what Anthony said a moment ago and what Sarah said previous to that. Understanding that your educational foundation has a purpose, not just in the story of your career, but in the story of your life. And then being able to tell that story effectively to an employer, I think would be a very, very helpful and intentional exercise that could pay off well for you in the end. You're not a block of information. You're not a block of data. You're not a block of bullet points. You are a composition of many things and many experiences. The main thing to button up all of this is that just learning how to use your past experience to tell your current and future story, I think is the route to go. So I will leave it at that.
Okay, perfect. Does anybody else have any other points on resumes or LinkedIn that we wanted to drill into before we kind of move to our third topic?
I'll hit on LinkedIn just to kind of close the loop on LinkedIn. I view the LinkedIn as complementary but different than the resume. We talked about the resume being that result-rich document. I view LinkedIn as your introduction to the hiring manager, to your future colleagues, to anyone who goes on Google and searches your name, because LinkedIn has a really high domain authority, that your LinkedIn profile is going to be one of the first, often 5 things that someone will see when they Google your name. So you want people who find your LinkedIn profile to like you. It's a chance to control the narrative and for them to read about you. So when writing your about section, and yes, I encourage folks to have a fully written out about section, I would encourage you to write it from the first person. People want to have that engaging narrative. I have some stats and I'll share them in the comments section. I've done some polls, and the majority of LinkedIn readers actually want storytelling in that about section versus that kind of like, Sarah Johnston is a global executive career branding expert. They want some story. They want to see why you like, why you do what you do. They want to see your why. So when you write out your about section, think about it from that first person perspective, your introduction. Also want to encourage you, and this may feel icky to some of you, to fully write out every single one of the sections that you have on LinkedIn. I see a lot of people miss this step, but LinkedIn, when they're ranking profiles for search engine optimization, your profile will rank higher if you've fully written out every single section. You're using keywords, not just a list of words, but you're using keywords on your profile, keywords in context, so keywords in sentences, and keyword density matters. So for example, if you're trying to rank and be in a top search result for the word, let's just say project manager, you want to have the word project manager on your LinkedIn profile multiple times. So perhaps project manager in your headline, project manager in your executive summary or your about section, and then your skills section. You know, a lot of times I see people who don't use LinkedIn a lot totally skip the skills section because it feels kind of useless and it looks kind of silly on your profile. But the skills section is one of the ways that LinkedIn actually kind of categorizes profiles. I don't know if you've ever built a WordPress website and you're focused on SEO and keyword building, but the skills section is that keyword aspect of your LinkedIn profile. So make sure that you select the keywords or the skills that a recruiter would be searching for to find someone with your skill set. And so the thing that I would just kind of drive home again is being human on LinkedIn, using the first person, but also using the right keywords that a recruiter would actually search for to find you. I say that accurate beats clever. So make sure that the words that you're using are not cute, but that they're really accurate for what someone would be searching for.
The LinkedIn guy, and I very much agree with everything Sarah just said. I think I even put in the chat a moment ago. Her first sentence expressed what I was trying to say in 2 minutes of talk time just a moment ago. So I'm going to come back in real quickly. I love everything she just said. Anthony has a note in there about LinkedIn references. There is a recommendations section. I highly advise everyone on this call, if you have a chance to ask a previous colleague, boss, lead, etc., to write you a very effective and efficient recommendation that will provide some impact for your LinkedIn profile. Going back to Sarah's point about LinkedIn kind of showing the more personal sides of you. I find it to be very effective when people demonstrate their passion and their purpose on LinkedIn. I have too. I'm a recruiter by trade. I love to help people, et cetera, from that standpoint. I'm also the co-chair of the Atlanta Executive Leadership Council for Autism Speaks. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see videos of my little boy on LinkedIn as my champion for the Autism Speaks side of the coin. And you'll see very personal and relatable stories on the recruiting space as well. And I think that that's helped me out a lot over the years. I think if you can express your purpose and your passion in a professional, that's a lot of P's, in a professional way on your LinkedIn, you're going to make that much more impact using that medium. So just FYI. So.
And I think it's going to humanize you too, because you're not going to be
100.
just a project manager who creates, stakeholder value by Excel data. Like it makes you into a person. And I'm with Ben with that. Those who are connected with me online, I do a lot of work in animal rescue. I drag dogs onto my webinar all the time so I can advertise, the rescue dogs that I work with. So, it is what it is, and that's who you are. And people like to see what you're passionate about. What Anthony said earlier, I'm going to be much more excited to talk about something that I care about than data, Excel, KPI. So, if you're able to mix those things, that's great. Before we move on to our third section, I want to address a comment in the Q&A, and I think we've hit this on every webinar we've had. The open to work green banner. Um, does anybody want to take this one, or I will, yep, go for it.
Do not be afraid of the green banner for open to work. I think that's a statement of intentionality. I know there's a lot of debate around that on LinkedIn. And matter of fact, there may be people on the panel that might disagree wholly or slightly with this statement. But I'm a big believer. If you're actively looking for work, I have no problem with people raising that flag. If you want to demonstrate yourself as open to work, but don't want to include the banner, there are ways of doing that behind the curtain as well, so that recruiters and hiring managers can see you. And we can certainly show you how to go about doing that if you need to. I don't have the mental steps memorized upstairs, but I can, if you reach out to me, I'll show you how to do that as well. That's my take.
But I like to add that we're all always open to work. No matter how much you like your job, these are, we say direct hire, they're not permanent roles. You're not guaranteed to be here. And everybody on this call, if I offered you $5 million to go sit under a palm tree and drink fruity drinks, you'd be like, I do really like this LinkedIn thing, but that sounds really great. So we're all always open to work, and it's just expressing that, and it makes your profile rank higher for recruiters. So I don't see the harm. Does anybody have an alternative opinion on that?
I'll just say this: I'm in my 40s. If the Atlanta Braves call me tomorrow, Sarah will laugh at this, as will Anthony, because both know that I'm a big baseball fan, as are they. If the Atlanta Braves call tomorrow, I might not be a recruiter on on Saturday.
I have a hot take on a couple of these things that are actually in the questions about the LinkedIn, and I'm gonna share my screen real quick. I just have my LinkedIn profile, but in a different view than what you guys would see publicly. It's how the LinkedIn recruiter tool works. And this is where a majority of your resumes end up when you apply. And I don't know how many of you guys probably see this I gotta be really careful about it because I can only show my profile. I don't want to show like a stranger's profile. So let me see if I can do this and share. So what is happening? You guys see this? Okay.
Yeah.
This is I applied to one of my own jobs I had posted. So back in the fall, I did a little bit of experiment, and I had a mechanical engineer role posted up here. I went and used ChatGPT. I said, hey, read this job description, rewrite my resume, and as a sample of what would be a good resume. And I applied back to the job to see like how high it ranked me. It actually helped. It brought me up really high in relevancy, which is scary because I don't know anything about mechanical engineering, but it did help with like the relevancy of terms. But this is what I wanted to show you guys is when a recruiter is looking at the results of the who applied to the job, like this job had 299 applicants. Now I did a keyword filter here and just put my first name so it only show my profile that applied. But if I would clear this out, all 299 people show up in this window. And then from there, there's different tools that a recruiter uses to like sort through who applied quickly. Okay. The other side of this is there is a way for us when we're doing a search, and I'm going to point over to the left hand of my side, and the search results will have these categories up at the top, and it's like a quick tabs for a recruiter to bucket the candidates in different things. The first thing that happens is this far left button, and I can't go to that view because they'll show up a bunch of strangers like profiles to you guys. But the first bucket over here will say who's open to work. And it doesn't mean you have to have the green banner like that's public. It just means in your profile, you need to say open to work. And as a recruiter, we start on that left-hand column. We hit that button first because we know those are the folks who are actually looking. Then I'll do like active in the market. Then I'll say, then it's like, it keeps going, like dropping off as far as like activity. So it is important to at least, even if you don't put it publicly, to put that, change your profile so it says open to work, because it will put you in this left-hand column. Another real quick thing, guys, if you did apply to a job, this is kind of what shows up where you see Clint Hawkins, picture me and my kids. This is what they see at first. And there might be 300 profiles like this. And then they'll click on your name and it pops up this little slide out. And this slide out then has your resume here that you applied. Then they have to click and it drops this down. So you're now in this like window within a window within a window type of thing. and it's not showing the resume that quickly, but this is where your resume actually ends up. It's like a frame within a frame. So having that top 1/3 of your content here, and really wish I could get this to show up for you guys so you can see where the content shows. This is where your resume actually gets viewed, and then a decision will be made about is it or do they want to move forward or not. So just give me a heads up. This is where you guys end up, that your application shows up afterwards. And then also going back to the point about summaries, if you scroll down and if they don't look at my actual PDF I uploaded, then here's my summary. I don't have a whole lot here. Sarah would probably be like, this is terrible. Anthony would be like, this is terrible. Like, this needs to be full of content here that is relevant to what you want to go after. Then it goes into the actual experience. And this actually here in the body of it is easier to read than whatever you uploaded. So having like this replicated in the body is really healthy because it helps somebody read through that quickly versus trying to open this PDF, which obviously right now is not even working for me. So you gotta have it like bulletproof for them to be able to see it. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing, but hopefully that helps you guys see what happens behind the scenes.
That was gold. I think more people need to see that type of stuff.
I've got some content out there that it's about a year old. I slow down and really walk folks through that. I'll pop it up here. I'll pop up the YouTube video for that. So it's kind of like a behind the scenes what goes on.
I know we're coming up on allotted time, but just to ask the question, would it be helpful if we showed them how to mark themselves as open to work on LinkedIn in a way that is blind? I'm putting that out to the audience. And by the way, if we're seeing that head nod there, okay, I'm going to do that real quickly because I just want to make sure that at least share this if I can.
And while you're showing them how to do open to work, I'll just add the contrarian view. I think it's important to add that you're open to work so that recruiters can see that. But I don't think you have to put the banner on your profile. And it's really by case situation for folks. When I work with executives, I often don't recommend the banner, and that's a whole longer discussion. But again, case by case basis, certainly recommend showing recruiters that you're open though.
And to be honest with you, if there is an audience that I would say, I understand your position, it would be your audience, your primary audience as well. This is my LinkedIn profile, and I'm not going to scroll down to show all my falls and flaws here, but if you click on right below here, it'll say open to. You can just click on open to and then finding a new job from here. And essentially what's going to happen is it's going to take you. And Clint, if I accidentally wind up marking myself open to work and Ben Cushing calls me later on today, just let him know that I'm not truly open to work. Just kidding. But yeah, so once you click on once you click on open to and new opportunities and so on and so forth, it'll take you to this screen. And this will basically, these are all the data points that you'll be selecting. If you're only open to remote work, you can obviously toggle accordingly from there. Open to the start dates. If you're actively applying, letting someone know an extra layer of urgency that you may have, you can click on immediately, I'm actively applying. Employment types, all of these employment types are obviously very relevant. And you can even set aside how you want to set it up. So you do have the green banner option if you want to do it to all LinkedIn members. That's the upfront option that everyone can see. Recruiters only is behind the curtain, and that goes to the screen that Clint was just demonstrating just a moment ago. That's where we can see it, but others cannot on that end. You can set your locations. There's a lot of different paths and ways about going on this, but just wanted to show people that naturally my mouse is acting funny as I'm trying to scroll out of this thing. There we go. And we're gonna peel out.
Now we have 10 more minutes of allotted time, correct, Ben? We're till 11:30.
Give me one quick second, I'll answer you, okay?
Oh, sorry, I meant my Ben, but yeah, either Ben. Just wanted to make sure before I dove into the Q&A and started trying to knock out a few questions. So there was, that is answered. Do we recommend adding LinkedIn learning certificates to our LinkedIn profile?
I would. Certifications and things of that nature that could beef up your credentials even in a small way. Learning credentials are yes, and my short version is yes.
I don't think it would hurt as long as it's aligned with what you
Agree.
have done, want to do, or augments things around the future. For example, you might not have AI like in place in your day job, but if you show history and pattern of these outside certs, that just means you're aware of it and you've got a better than surface level understanding, which you can then leverage into the future.
Yeah.
What about writing articles on LinkedIn? Has anybody had any experience with gaining exposure or building their profile through doing that?
I
I
just,
can I can answer that super quick. This is Benjamin Mena, the guy behind the scenes. It's a really good long-term play because LinkedIn, like they said earlier, does a really good job with pushing up on the SEO. I don't know if might impact this very second for job search, but
Storage.
it can really help for the long game.
it's branding.
And with that, I have a question. I want to send this one over to Sarah. Somebody asked, they're open to multiple roles. So they have resumes printed out, ready to go, which we love, for chief of staff and partnership manager roles. Their LinkedIn is more general. Do they need to commit to one on their profile, or should they stay kind of just in that center lane? And this might be something that we can't answer, a little too vaguely.
It's a little vague, but I'll flip the question to you and I'll say, let's say you're the recruiter and you've got 100 candidates that you're evaluating for an opportunity and you're just kind of sourcing through profiles and you're looking at profiles just like Clint showed us how to do. And you see someone's profile and it says one thing, but it's different than the role that you're recruiting. Are you going to stop on that profile and spend more time if you've got a busy day and click around and spend a lot of time looking at it? Or are you going to click over and look at the next profile? And that's a long way to say, I think in this market where there are more candidates than jobs in some situations, the more clear you can be in your branding and your messaging, and the more aligned that you can be with your opportunity, the more people are going to be interested in you. And so in some cases, I think you either need to pick a lane or make sure your messaging really aligns with both opportunities. Anthony, Clint, do you guys want to add anything to that?
I think there's a lot of precursors that LinkedIn will give you. Like you say, what's kind of jobs you're looking for, and they'll build out this little profile for you of like the types of the categories you want to go after, and kind of like Sarah you mentioned earlier, like and Anthony was saying it too. It's like if you lean into some of the automatic things that LinkedIn prompts you to do, and even like going back to the LinkedIn certifications, anything that you're using within the LinkedIn ecosystem that's like precursored, it actually helps your relevancy because at the end of the day, when you apply, LinkedIn's already kind of like they're nudging you up to the top because you're playing ball the way that they want people to play ball.
Paid to play.
Yeah, so you're kind of you're running with the flow versus against it on the LinkedIn side. I would say in general, I have seen people, especially when it comes to like the program manager versus like a chief of staff, jump from back. Like I've seen people in the past couple of years actually go from these like really great program manager roles where they're both influencing culture, the driving process. So like they're kind of like they're taking ownership of a lot of things within a division of a company or federal sector and moving to a chief of staff role. And chief of staff is it's one chief of staff and CROs are like two really popular terms of like categories that are growing. So I think it's okay to have like your aspirations is to go after those. It'd be kind of funny though if you wouldn't be like, I am a data analyst and I want to be a chief of staff. People are like, okay, those don't kind of match. But you gotta look at like what's the Venn diagram of the types of titles that you're seeing. Okay, there's overlaps in these spaces, and I think that's safe when you get some really things that are they're not congruent with each other. That's when they could throw a recruiter off. Like, wait, you're searching for two completely different types of careers right now. I'm not sure what what the intention is.
No, that was a great answer. And I know there are a few more questions that we didn't have time for, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you again to everybody who joined us. Again, we had Benjamin Sheffield from S&I. We had Sarah Johnson, the briefcase coach. We had Anthony Roman, VP at Oh, I'm so sorry. RPG? Is that
RGP, really great.
RGP? Oh, I'm so sorry. I was so close. And we have Clinton Hawkins, VP at GEE Group. We're going to have everybody's LinkedIn linked in the chat. Please connect with all of us, if for no other reason than to grow your network, because once you connect with me, you have access to my network as well. So between the team of us, it's going to be quite a few new connections for everybody. Thank you to Gamma for hosting this and Benjamin Mena for having us. Ben, do you have anything to close this out?
I just want to say, like, I'm glad that you guys said something about the time because I know I got the other person like already in the queue in the lobby for the next session. Like I was like, this is good, and time just magically flew. Like I literally lost track of time because it was so good. So I just want to say thank you guys for coming in and sharing. I know everybody's been impacted by what's happening currently in the federal market. So thank you guys for everything that you gave. Make sure to follow them on LinkedIn, connect with them on LinkedIn. And this replay will be up in probably about an hour or so. So thank you guys.
Thank you all, and thank you, Ben, and hopefully this helps everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the
Thanks,
time.
y'all. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.